Happy Tuesday to you. It's the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 429 State Street. Also live on Facebook and on YouTube. And we have a very serious topic to discuss here, and that is the situation with human trafficking. And Jordan Pine is our guest, and we want to welcome Jordan, the president, the founder and CEO of Greenlight operation. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today.
I appreciate it. Again, you grew up in Girard, right?
I did. I'm a former Yellow Jacket and still hold true to the red and yellow. Yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Fantastic. Let's get started with a little bit of your story. Again, we're a family show. We like to get origin stories. And what was it like coming up in Girard? And how did your journey bring you to this place in the work of anti-human trafficking?
Yeah, it certainly isn't a typical job trajectory to go from growing up in Erie, Pennsylvania, to then launching a nonprofit to work in the anti-trafficking world. So for me, it really started when I was in middle school, which sounds odd. But I grew up in a family that was very involved in church and in ministry. And so we had the opportunity to engage quite a bit with missionaries from all over the world and hearing what's happening in other parts of the world. And so I will never forget having the opportunity to learn from some missionaries from India, coming back and sharing about their great work that they were doing, but in an age-appropriate manner. They started to share with our family and also then shared at a conference I was at about an issue I had never heard about and most people had never heard about, and that was human trafficking.
How long ago was this, do you think, Jordan?
Oh, goodness. This would have probably been about 20 some years ago at this point.
Because,
I was in middle school.
I don't even think we had those words, did we?
No, we didn't even have words for it. So what they were seeing were children being sold in the open marketplace in this village in India, and families that couldn't put food on the table. And so, to care for the other children, they had to make the most horrific decision to sell a child. And they were seeing this in the marketplace and coming back and saying, we don't know what to do. We've never seen this before. And I couldn't shake the thought of something like that happening in today's world. So then fast forward, I went on and went to Messiah University where continue to learn about human trafficking, but there was so much misunderstanding surrounding this issue that...
What was your degree that you were pursuing in this context?
Yes, so I pursued politics with a minor in criminal justice, yes. And I recall even in high school, before I even made it to college, talking about human trafficking and the idea that talking about that would lead to somebody being endangered. I remember very well-intended community members and people saying, don't talk about that, because if you talk about it, you too will be harmed or trafficked and they're going to come and get you. And, I think about that now, and that could have discouraged so much great work that would come and solutions that could come forward. And so continue to learn about human trafficking and began to recognize that it wasn't just happening in other foreign countries or other places around the world, but it was happening here in the United States and in Pennsylvania. And in fact, our state is a top state for human trafficking, but it still wasn't being talked about even in 2018 at the time that Greenlight operation started. So it definitely was a slower, journey and learning about it and seeing ways to get involved, which then led to our organization getting started.
I'm amazed at how, what prompted you to start the organization itself, because did you just look at the lay of the land and say, hey, nobody's really tackling this? At least not to the level that you thought it should be?
So, yes, essentially, going to college, you think you're going to be able to find those dream jobs. And there weren't jobs in the anti-human trafficking field when I graduated. And so continue to look at how can we still be a solution in this region. And it started with just simply volunteering and getting involved with our local church and responding in that way. I don't think we ever thought it would end up growing into its own organization and have the reach we do now. But I'm grateful it did go in that direction. And so then we officially started Greenlight operation in 2018.
So tell us about the mission and specifically what are the things that you do at Greenlight Operation?
Yeah. So Greenlight Operation, we are a Pennsylvania-based nonprofit, and we work to strategically combat human trafficking we do that through educational initiatives and then also through restorative care for women who have been sex trafficked. And this can look anything from bringing community awareness and seminars and training, or working with law enforcement, maybe legislators. We also serve in schools, training up students on what are the signs to look for, because trafficking also functions through technology, and how many kids are plugged into technology, and training them on that. But then on the other end, as awareness grows, more survivors then are identified and recognized, and they need care and healing. As you can imagine, this is a very horrific and dangerous criminal industry, and the trauma somebody goes through once they've been trafficked is unimaginable. And so we're in the process of opening a home and are anticipating to soon accept residents, and this will be providing trauma therapy, counseling, and healing services to women who have been sexually exploited by human trafficking.
Maybe you can it's so alarming that it's happening in a country where we love freedom, right? So first off, let's maybe throw away some preconceived notions. Are people that get caught into trafficking generally foreign nationals in America, or are there Americans that are trafficked?
That is a great question. It's both. I would say we actually tend to overlook the Americans who are being trafficked because we're so focused on it typically being foreign nationals. And what we also miss in pegging it with certain demographics as well is we're also missing the youth who are being exploited, or even the families who are trafficking family members. If we're thinking it's only this large scale organized crime that trafficking is happening with, and it can and it does function in that way, but it could also look like one of the very first cases I worked on, where we had a woman in her 20s who was seeking refuge and care, and went on to share her story of trafficking started when she was 8 years old, and it was her mother who was trafficking her. She would go to school every single day, come home, get off the bus, and there would be a menu of items that people could choose and select various sexual acts that they wanted to essentially perform with this 8-year-old. And this was happening every single day for this child after school because her mom was so addicted to substances and the next high and needed to pay off her dealer that she started to sell her own child. But this became that child's life, and she didn't know any other way. And she ages up through and then has, boyfriends who are doing this to her spouses later in life. And it wasn't until her later 20s that she learned that this isn't how I have to live my life. But that started at 8 years old. And I think we then sometimes miss, and we can focus on the survivor, which is very important, but we also miss the people that were buying that child and that were propelling this forward. And so there are a lot of layers to human trafficking. It can be the large criminal ring, but it can also be a one-off situation like that where it's a parent selling a child, or a romantic partner, selling, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, or something along those lines as well.
I gotta say that's one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
that a human went through that.
It's awful. It's awful. And then when we think of what they've gone through, and as you can imagine, especially when it's starting for some in adolescence as a child with a person they're supposed to be able to trust the most. Right. And I wish I could say that was an isolated story or event, but there are many others that follow similar narratives. And this is why for us it's very important we're able to educate students in schools and youth groups and youth centers so that they understand that there's help available to them, that they don't have to go on to continue living that way. And maybe it's not a caregiver doing it to them, but it could be a predator online. It could be a relative, or maybe even a peer. We've had instances in school systems where there are older children and students who maybe, whether it's to gain popularity or status, decide that they are going to offer maybe tickets to prom or to a dance to underclassmen, and exploit then those underclassmen and say, all right, if you want this ticket, you have to sleep with me or with this person and do this, this, and that. And it can be an awful cycle. And sometimes the youth don't even realize there's a term for that, or that it's considered a criminal activity. And obviously there are major repercussions for that. But it can happen in so many different layers in our society, but we're often very blind to it happening, which is why it goes largely unrecognized.
So do you see interconnectedness with things like date rape and, other forms of abuse that could happen, with known actors?
Absolutely. I mean, all of it can tie together. I would say human trafficking, though, in and of itself it's domestic violence, sexual assault. It's that on steroids. But it's also maybe important to take a step back and share, what is human trafficking? We often use the term modern day slavery with it. It's the buying and selling of a human being. Now, with minors, it's important to note this, that any commercial sex act involving a minor is automatically recognized as human trafficking. And so if there's an exchange of money, of goods, of clothing, those tickets to a dance, and that child, and that is being commercialized, that sex act with that child is being commercialized, that's automatically human trafficking with a minor. Now, when it comes to adults, it's that buying and selling of a human being. And usually there's force, fraud, or coercion present. And that person is being bought and sold for sex, or they're being bought and sold for forced labor. But if we think about how a human has many different abilities and talents and ways to do things, and if we think about it in a positive way, we look at it in the way of, okay, there are different jobs a person can get, different skill sets. We all have different elements to us. But these criminals are distorting that, and they're saying, how can we monetize and how can we make money off of these people for labor? How can we make money off of them for sex? How can we make money off of them even through things like forced surrogacy, organ harvesting, things like that? And they're exploiting human beings. And something that is shocking and why we want to sound the alarm on this is because we're seeing many criminals and others turning to human trafficking rather than other forms of traditional criminal activity, because unlike drugs and other substances or goods, a human can be used over and over and over again. So they're able to make a lot of money off of one person, exploiting them in the most horrific ways. And it's generated by money, and people are buying into it. It would stop today if people weren't buying into it, and that's a reality of this that we're dealing with.
There's a consumer out there that is creating a demand that needs to be squelched. We're talking to Jordan Pine. She is from Greenlight Operations. She's here in town. We're going to find out why and some of the special events that are happening this week here. It is 4:19. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. Our guest is Jordan Pine. She's the founder and CEO of Greenlight Operation. No phone calls, but if you want to text us a question, 814-679-1080. Jordan, somebody is asking, has there ever not been human trafficking?
You know, in a way, I would say probably not. I would say that this is something, exploitation in a variety of ways has existed, you know, since the start. I mean, and so, well, I would say for me as a Christian, I think of it as, you know, when sin entered this world, I would say that, exploitation was right alongside of that soon after.
Why are you here? What's happening this week that you're bringing this information to folks? I know you're working with the Erie Women's Fund. Talk about all that.
Yeah, we are very excited and grateful for the Erie Women's Fund, who has sponsored an event and our travel up here to bring education tomorrow, where there will be a luncheon with the Erie Women's Fund, followed by a roundtable discussion, because we know that with issues that are as complex as human trafficking, there are a lot of layers and elements to consider. It's important to take a multidisciplinary approach and have different perspectives around the table so that we can properly assess what is happening with human trafficking here in Erie County, and how can we together mobilize ourselves to have long-term impact and effective change. So we're very grateful for them organizing these educational opportunities and roundtable discussions that will follow that seminar.
I had heard over the years that our proximity to the two interstates left us in a place where a lot more human trafficking was happening in Erie County than we thought.
Oh, absolutely. If we even simply look at the National Human Trafficking Hotline statistics on reported cases by state, you will see Pennsylvania is 11th in the nation for most reported cases of human trafficking. But if you look here in Erie, Pennsylvania, where we're sandwiched is right between Ohio and New York. These are two states that you've got New York, which is within the top 5 states, and you've got Ohio, which is within the top 10. I believe they rank about 5th in the nation and 7th in the nation.
Wow.
And so to expect that Erie would be exempt from those trends would be wild, especially considering, too, how close we are to an international border. Now, that doesn't mean all human trafficking is happening on the borders. It can, and there is trafficking that does happen. But where Erie is situated, as we look at the landscape of our nation, it is not only primed to be a pass-through city where traffickers could drive people through the city, but it's also truly a destination city as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of entertainment that happens here, conventions that take place, hotels, the hospitality industry is very prevalent. And when you think about maybe some of the travel experiences that buyers are looking for, they might want to have a good time and, take some time to relax while they're here for the weekend and kick back and look for those sort of perks that a trafficker is going to be offering. And so it's wild if we are thinking that trafficking doesn't happen here, right, or how prevalent it is. And that's just scratching the surface of the ones that are traveling. There are many where trafficking is happening within homes and happening online as well. And you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home for a person to be exploited by human trafficking. And I think those are the regions, too, that we are missing quite a bit as well. So
let's talk about the internet a second here. And again, I would imagine that internet pornography just folds into all of this, and now it's almost, there's people that are treating pornography like this is just part of our culture, and everybody's got an OnlyFans, and I know nothing about any of this stuff, but
it's saturated in our culture, and what that does when we are hypersexualizing a culture, things like this then don't seem as bad as they are. And people may justify it by saying, well, this person chose this life, or, they kind of saw it going there, didn't they? And these are things that we hear people saying. We don't believe that, because the reality is it's a horrific industry. It is something where many victims, I mean, how do you, when you're looking at pornography, how can you tell if a person's a willing participant or not? We've served survivors who've been exploited through pornography, and it's often used even as a training tool for them, where they are forced to watch it, and then that is what they're forced to do for the clients and perform in certain ways for the trafficker. And so we see just how it's not only impacting the survivors, but it's creating a hypersexualized culture, especially for our young people. And the way that their brains even develop and are not fully formed until their 20s, it's having a major impact where we're seeing a great deal of sexual violence amongst younger people. The results of pornography are resulting in youth that don't know how to express in the right way, and younger people that are being exploited by even 12-year-olds and others around the age because they've had access to pornography, and it's harming their minds, and they don't know what to do with it because they don't understand what they're seeing. And so they're acting out in those ways, but that makes it then dangerous for other youth and then too others they're going to encounter later in life as well. So, pornography we see certainly as a breeding ground for something like human trafficking that pours directly into it.
I would, and I've just got a minute before we have to go to our bottom of the hour break, but I would think that it's pretty heroic for the Women's Fund and the folks that you're working with this week to have these conversations because, again, this is brand new material for me. I've had a radio show for 6 years. I don't think we've ever broached this, not to anywhere near this level.
Yeah. Yeah, we are grateful because this is something that is newer that people are coming to understand. There's always that level of, I'm so grateful for the Erie Women's Fund taking that risk to say, we need to bring education about this. It's an uncomfortable topic. I would say that part of why human trafficking has thrived for so long in the United States and in Pennsylvania is because we don't like to talk about the uncomfortable topics. We want to either pretend it's not there because then we don't have to deal with it, or it makes us feel weird and uncomfortable and we don't want to talk about it. But what happens? What ends up happening is it thrives, and it thrives in that silence. And now we're at a point where it's starting to bubble up, and we have a society that's relatively ill-equipped to handle how do we recognize it, how do we process the reports, and where do survivors go for the help that they desperately need when they're recognized.
More with Jordan Pine when we come back after the news. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Thanks for tuning in. It's 4:34 on the Joel Natale Show from 105.9 Talk Erie WZTE, having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. And we're discussing the very, very tough topic, but important topic of anti-human trafficking. And Jordan Pine is with us. She's a Girard, Pennsylvania native, the founder and CEO of Greenlight Operation. What does Greenlight Operation stand for there?
Yes. So when we first started, I remember there was a map that was in front of us that showed where the hot spots of human trafficking were throughout Pennsylvania. And so we set out to what we called those red light districts. We set out to turn those red light districts into green light districts that were places free of sexual exploitation and human trafficking.
Let's talk about the laws that are in place here. I know that you have provided some testimony in Harrisburg on behalf of Senator Laughlin's safe harbor legislation. Do we have the laws in place to protect people?
We're getting there.
Okay.
I would say this is something that is starting to turn the attention of lawmakers. And this is where the voice of community members is very important, because when your legislator knows that this is an issue that is near and dear to your heart and that you care about, that is where we're seeing them starting to take attention to these various bills and policies. And so at this point in time, we have seen some great victories, such as the Safe Harbor Law, the Buyer Beware Act, and other bills that were introduced but didn't pass this legislative session. So we're very eager for what this new legislative session will hold.
What would they do? What kind of protections did they provide in the Safe Harbor Law, for example?
Sure. So things like for the Safe Harbor, I can't speak a ton to that one in particular, and we're very grateful because that one moved quick. But it essentially, that one does protect children and just the way in which testimonies take place. Really taking a far more victim-centered approach that's not going to re-exploit them in the process. But there are other laws and bills that we've seen, like the Buyer Beware Act. That one was really focused on let's go after the buyers, the people that are fueling this industry, and how can we further penalize them.
It's kind of like going after the Johns.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're going after. Johns, the traffickers.
Yeah.
And starting to draw attention to where for so long our laws, because prostitution's illegal and things like that, we were seeing many victims who were then being charged instead. And those Johns and the clients that were essentially going out free,
Scot-free.
They had no repercussions. And so it's starting to turn that narrative. Our challenge and what we're seeing, though, is the actual implementation of that and the accountability there. And again, this is where community members come into play of our police forces, enacting this? Are we seeing that prosecutions and offenses filed with the Pennsylvania court systems, is it matching what we're hoping to see with these laws enacted? And I can tell you just 3 days ago, the PA court system released the offenses that were prosecuted in Pennsylvania. Erie's not showing up on that one right now as far as a top region. Very minimal cases that are getting prosecuted and sent to courts. And a lot of times that data is used to say, and we hear it a lot, see that county represented, they must have a huge human trafficking problem. Almost like, look at what's happening over there.
Yeah.
I would counter that by saying, if you are not seeing your county represented on documents like that, it tells me there isn't an anti-human trafficking response in place, or one that's not working. And that doesn't mean it can't be fixed. And so I think I'm so excited about the roundtable tomorrow, and very excited to hear that the law enforcement, the district attorney, that they are eager to see improvements made in this region. But laws help get that moving forward. But we need to see those laws then paired with what's actually happening and the accountability there. So some that we're looking forward to and want to see that will assist further with the anti-trafficking field are things like there was a law that was put into place, or it was a bill that was proposed last session, and that was to add licensure for the illicit massage businesses. We're seeing so many illicit massage businesses that are fronts for human trafficking, but there's very little police can do currently beyond codes enforcement and things like that. And so if there was a little bit more of that licensing requirement, it would essentially help mitigate some of these bad players in these sort of businesses and reduce that. Things like vacatur law. That sounds like a foreign language, kind of is. I remember I first heard about it. I'm like, what is this? But essentially it's saying for those that have been harmed and hurt and exploited while they were doing that, they were under somebody else's control, oftentimes they're forced to take on the crimes and they are getting the charges that the trafficker really should have, but they're the ones that are doing the dirty work for that person. And so this is saying, let's expunge those criminal records for them so then they can actually get jobs and they can go on to have housing and live, outside of that trauma and all that got stacked up against them. So it's giving a foot forward. So laws are very important in this. Yeah. We're eager to see what moves forward in this upcoming year and are very grateful for Senator Laughlin's office and many others who are joining the ranks to say that they want to see us do even better in our state in anti-trafficking work.
Jordan, I want you to speak to the role of technology both in the perpetuation of trafficking, but also maybe in the help of helping victims.
Yeah, definitely that double-edged sword, right? So with technology, what we are seeing is it's something that we have a phone. Most of us, the phone is attached to our hip. It's everywhere that we go. And we have a whole generation of youth that have been raised on this. And some, it's almost like the moment they come out of the womb, they've got a phone in some cases. And the sad piece, though, is what might seem like some innocent apps or, peers are all doing it. Things like Roblox. That is one that is very targeted towards children and is an app that many children and families will use and seems innocent at a quick glance. But this is actually one that many predators are using to prey upon youth and children, whether that's through creating characters that are going to encourage the child to leave that app and go to a different app to speak with them. And if any app has a live chat feature, you better believe there's going to be a predator or trafficker there.
So pretty much any type of online Xbox, PlayStation or whatever, if it's live fighting or whatever, more than likely there's a predator somewhere around there.
If there's an opportunity to engage with somebody in real time, whether that's through chat, streaming, or something live, yes, there is a possibility that a trafficker or predator could be present. Yep.
So like you say, a double-edged sword there. Are you able to use tech or to have people reach out to your organization or other organizations for help too?
Yes, and we are very grateful. So there have been great advancements with technology, being able to combat the traffickers as well. Groups like the Acervo Project, Shared Hope International have wonderful apps and features that are being released to assist with, obviously the police can't go through everybody's phone and see what's going on. But these are ways to essentially sift through a lot of the online data to assist with some of these cases. But what I would say is the first line of defense, though, it's not our lawmakers. Our first line of defense is not going to be these apps. It's going to be caregivers, and it's going to be those within the home and having conversations and setting boundaries around healthy phone usage and talking about, it's not great to have your phone on you in the bedroom, in the bathroom. And let's talk about what are some of the dangers that are out there. And if you get a message from somebody you don't know, let's have that conversation with children on, have them come and talk to that caregiver and that trusted adult versus they hide it and they carry that. And we're seeing suicide rates increasing more and more as it relates to the grooming and the exploitation that's happening online because these children don't know what to do. Their minds can't comprehend what's happening and they panic. And so the first line of defense, families, is to have that conversation with your children about what are the boundaries, the safeguards, and how and when are we going to be using phones or not using them.
What kind of role would the K-12 system have with, again, trying to fight to be an anti-trafficker. I mean, I would think that this would take a lot of training to just be able to look out for the telltale signs, right?
It does. So with Greenlight Operation, we offer an Act 48 certified curriculum for teachers. So this would go towards the annual licensing requirements. They can partake in an understanding human trafficking curriculum, and it will help teachers be a line of defense in the classrooms as well. And then we also do trainings in middle school and high schools as well, offering assemblies, class trainings on things like online safety, what is human trafficking, what are safe relationships, and providing age-appropriate content, of course, through that entire process. But there are some days where kids are spending more time at school than they are at home. So having those educators and administrators aware of the signs to look for and what to do is massive, and also being a line of defense.
I want to also ask about where child labor. There's been some significant stories about children just being manipulated and abused in labor. In a labor intensive thing. I mean, I guess it was, I don't want to point out one particular industry, but I think it was like meat packers or something like that, where they were near dangerous machines and working crazy hours. It was just a horrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, child labor, forced labor, it's incredibly prevalent worldwide. This is where it's good to know, what are who are the people we're doing business with, and even who are we buying products from? Do we know if they are on the up and up with what they're doing? Because our money talks, and we've actually seen some businesses change their supply lines and the ways they conduct their labor. I think Nike's a great example of this. They were getting a lot of pressure for things like the sweatshops and not having a clean supply chain. Their consumers said, we don't want this. We want to see better. And so they started withdrawing their support, stopped buying those products. And that spoke to the company. And suddenly they started doing so much better. And that's the thing, too. I would hope that companies can course correct once they start hearing, too, that their customers want to see better.
You were mentioning off the air that the church is, and churches are sometimes really stepping into this space and providing hope and a refuge. Can you talk about some of those stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can even speak to our own for Greenlight Operation. We, my husband and I were serving in a local church in the Harrisburg region, and when this issue of human trafficking started coming forward, I'm so grateful for our church that said, okay, how can we respond and be a support to these individuals and raise awareness? And, our story is not the only one we've heard that's like that either. Is churches are recognizing that maybe congregants have been exploited or harmed, or those reports are coming forward, and it's important for them to be equipped, but others are saying, you know what, let's take that a step forward and let's do more. And it can look different for everybody in a response. It could look like counseling services. It could look like housing, providing basic needs and things like that. But I think, having a community that's responding that way is so important.
Absolutely. So you're not seeing skittishness or, this is a topic that's verboten or whatever like that.
I think there's a level of skittishness everywhere, but I'd say I am noticing that there is more boldness even in the midst of that through our church communities that we're seeing.
That's cool.
Yep.
Before we talk about, again, the brass tacks of what you're doing here this week, I want to see if we can give either a checklist or some kind of better awareness to folks, either both parents and children, to protect themselves from what could be a potential trafficking situation.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know what the telltale signs are, I guess?
Oh, yeah. So as far as telltale signs, I would say on our website, we do have those listed out at greenlightoperation.org. And these are provided by the Department of Homeland Security. What I would add to this would be when you notice changes in behavior, the person is withdrawn, and talking mostly for youth and parents looking for signs with their children, would be things like you're seeing those changes in behavior. Maybe you're starting to notice a hypersexualized behavior, a constant need to check in on their phone, and maybe a sense where there's an anxiety, like if they don't check their phone, something might happen. And those could be signs that maybe somebody is pressuring them online and trying to seek information, photos, or whatever that might be. Now, that is just that particular example. We have a lot of signs for other instances. How do you notice it on the job site? How do you notice it within your community and things like that? But I'd say the best thing to do is just have conversation. Talk about these things. If you're starting to notice or feel that something is off, talk about it. Ask what's going on. And the more we show interest in others, they will reciprocate and they share. I don't think we have to go and play the superhero and go do a sting operation, but sometimes just being a good neighbor or a good family member who's checking in and showing that person that they're loved, not only could that help in an intervention, but it could also help prevent it altogether, because what drives this for many is they're seeking acceptance, they're seeking love. So if they don't feel isolated and if they feel like somebody is there for them and cares for them, already we've removed a major vulnerability to somebody being prone to being trafficked. And so, just being that good neighbor and being a trusted person that somebody can go to is major.
And identifying the bad actors, if you're the young person, how do you know? Stranger danger actually works here, doesn't it?
Yeah,
a little bit.
It does. It does a little bit. Now, if you can't see the person, if they're online, just being very careful about information that's being shared. If something seems too good to be true, if someone's promising a high-paying job, lots of cash, or we're seeing, promises of a modeling career or to become an influencer and to be noticed or things like that, that can be great, but, it might start innocently. But as soon as they start asking for things you're not comfortable with, and if they are not letting up on that right there, that's a sign too. There's an indicator that something is off and this person is crossing a boundary. So I think having firm boundaries for yourself, if somebody starts to cross those and ignore them, something's not right.
Yeah.
We need to check in on that.
No, that's amazing. Jordan Pine, again, are you appearing publicly, or these? Talk about the rest of your week here.
I am. So, yes, tomorrow we've got a couple more interviews, but I'm very excited to be joining the Erie Women's Fund for a luncheon and a seminar with them, as well as some other community leaders. Following that, we'll have a roundtable discussion where we will have the chance to talk with Erie County's district attorney, law enforcement, lawmakers, and really work to assess what is happening in the world of human trafficking here and how can we create a strategy together that's going to be effective for this region. And then very excited to join one of our wonderful church partners at the Federated Church on Wednesday evening for a prayer meeting and update there. And so, yes, there's going to be a marathon of speaking happening. If you want to catch any of those or any of the streams happening, we would love for you to do that and tune in.
And your website one more time?
It is greenlightoperation.org, and we are also on Facebook as well as Instagram, and we have a podcast to assist people with learning more about human trafficking, and also a chance to even hear from survivors on that podcast as well. And that's just the Greenlight Operation podcast.
Thanks for all that you're doing for your fellow man, and really thank you for educating us. We learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
It is 4:53. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show.